Whoa, that's weird.
What?
Do you hear the thumping?
Bro, you're crazy.
It calls to me.
Sule! Today, I want to talk about one of the most important events in the history of the Cosmere, the destruction of the Shard Ambition. There will be spoilers for the Stormlight Archive, Arcanum Unbounded, including Shadows for Silence and the Forests of Hell, the Sunlit Man, and Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. We won't be spoiling anything from Isles of the Emberdark until the end of the video. If you haven't read Emberdark, I'll warn you when to skip ahead. I promise. If you are part of the 71.8% of people who are not subscribed to the channel and you're watching, please subscribe. With that all out of the way, let's begin by talking about who Ambition was before her death. Ambition, like all of the other shards of Adenalsium, was taken up by a person from the planet Yolen. This vessel was called Uli Da, and she is unique among the currently known vessels. As far as I'm aware, she's the only shard that is confirmed to be Shodel, a humanoid species native to Yolen. They, like the other Fane species on Yolen, have 6 limbs. In this case, 2 legs and 4 arms. There is more to say about these Fane species, but I'm gonna save that for a future video. We do not know much about Ulida's personality, but we have a relatively good idea about her standing with her other siblings, or rather her fellow 15 shardic vessels. At least 2 of these shards, including the one that killed her, thought that she would be a problem after her ascension. Odium, the god of hatred, among other things, was the one to kill Ambition, but more on that later. Here is what Odium's vessel Raze had to say to Honor's vessel Tanavast about this deed. From Wind and Truth, chapter 104. "Don't look at me like that, Tanner," Raze said. "You knew that Ambition was going to be a problem. We all knew it, right from the start." Ambition? You mean Ulida? I performed a service for us all. Praise me. Feel the gratitude, Tanner. Know it. While this may be a warped perspective by a shard who's looking for an excuse to kill the others, he is unfortunately not the only one with this perspective. Endowment's vessel Edgeley states this in Oathbringer's chapter 40 epigraph. As for Ulida, it was obvious from the outset that she was going to be a problem. Good riddance. Maybe the Shodel were generally disliked or discriminated against on Yolen, leading to this distrust and disgust of Ulida. Maybe Ulida herself was problematic, or maybe there's something specific about the Shard Ambition that made Ulida particularly dangerous. I'm gonna let you debate that in the comments below. The destruction of Ambition was not a simple historical event. This was a duel between gods that ravaged parts of the Cosmere, and when I say gods, I'm not just referring to Ambition and Odium. Here's what Harmony had to say about this fight. From Rhythm of War's chapter 27 epigraph. That said, the most worrying thing I discovered in this was the wound upon the spiritual realm, where Ambition, Mercy, and Odium clashed, and Ambition was destroyed. The effects on the planet Threnody have been disturbing. We will talk about Threnody in a bit, but I want to quickly talk about Mercy's involvement with the death of Ambition. Not much is known about Mercy or her unknown vessel. Harmony claims that Mercy was involved with this clash of gods, and in the same letter, he shares one more thing about this mysterious shard. He simply states, "Mercy worries me." What was Mercy's involvement with Ambition's destruction? Did her vessel agree with Raze and Edgeley's prejudice towards Ulida, joining up with Odium to put down the problem? Was she working alongside Ambition, breaking the shard's pact of non-intervention and inviting Odium's fury? Or was she minding her own business, invested on Threnody before being caught up in an attack that she couldn't leave alone? Another debate for the comments. If the death of a god sounds violent and destructive, you would be correct. Here is what the Shard Honor saw when he gazed upon Odium's work. From Wind and Truth, chapter 113. "I looked to the place where Ambition had died, out in space, distant. Their clash had been so destructive, the entire region, including multiple planets, had been annihilated. Other planets lay broken, barely habitable. We do not know which planets were annihilated, and we likely never will. Luckily for us, there is one planet that suffered, which scholars have been able to access. A planet that was previously invested by a shard. Threnody. Just listen to the scholar Chris's description of the event. From Arcanum Unbounded, the Threnody system. I have concluded that some measure of investiture must have existed on the planet before the battle between shards. However, the waves of destruction, carrying ripped off chunks of Ambition's power, twisted both the people and the planet of Threnody. Threnody is hell. No, literally. Like, there's a location on the planet called the Forests of Hell. The Threnodites fled their homeland to seek these forests. Why? Well, because their main continent began to be ravaged by one of these chunks of Ambition's power, the Evil. There are many legends about the Evil on Threnody, but few have seen it with their own eyes. One well-traveled scholar has seen it, and here is how Nomad describes it. From the Sunlit Man, chapter 15, wild, unchained investiture, come to life with its own alien will, forming mountain-sized figures with impossible, unnerving features and unknowable motivations. Whatever the Evil is, it is more than a single figure. They are incredibly large and seemingly want nothing more than to destroy whatever life is in front of them. Now, the Evil is not the only danger on Threnody. As stated before, the Threnodites fled the Evil to a place called the Forests of Hell. This is an apt description, as the forests on Threnody are haunted by shades. I will once again let the scholar Chris describe these spirits. People on Threnody are afflicted with a particular ailment that, upon death, sometimes turns them into what we call a cognitive shadow. A spirit infused with extra investiture will often imprint upon that very power. They are instantiations of self-aware, well, in this case, barely self-aware, investiture. These shades are like evil ghosts. They appear as white translucent spirits that generally look like the body of the deceased Threnodite. They can pass through walls and people, but you definitely don't want them to pass through you. One touch from a shade will necrotically wither your flesh to the very bone. Only silver has the properties that can practically stop and sometimes reverse the withering effects. That is, of course, unless you're a gold fairing or aluminum misting, but that's generally not practical. Luckily, shades also just don't like silver. You can use silver-lined entrances to keep them out, and they can also be harmed or die by a silver weapon. In general, you're actually pretty safe from the shades, as they tend to avoid living souls. However, you best follow these 3 simple rules. These are listed in order of most enraging to least enraging to the shades. Do not run during the night. Do not kindle a flame. And do not shed the blood of another. If you enrage a shade, their eyes will glow green and their bodies will turn black as they chase the perpetrator. If they are further enraged, their eyes will glow red and they will pursue you much faster. These shades can sometimes speak, though their memories and sapience are usually questionable at best. Additionally, we do see the Night Brigade with the ability to control shades at the end of Sunlit Man, which must be pretty useful for torture and fear tactics. While I stated that the shades are generally void of memory and sapience, there are some outliers. The Threnodite refugees on Canticle are in possession of the Chorus, a large glass container filled with shades. These specific shades are presumably the original Threnodites who fled Threnody and came to Canticle. This is evident by their complete joy to yap all about how they are the first to have died on Canticle. Maybe it's the heavy concentration of shades, or maybe the previous Threnodites were invested, but their ability to hold conversations is a rather unique ability for the group. On that note, one of the shades declares that they are not shades because of this ability. The way Coppermine displays this quote is pretty hilarious. Shades do not remember. We are not shades. A shade in the Beaconite chorus. The final interesting thing about the Chorus is that they have a somewhat unique ability. They can create almost anything when provided the right materials and schematics. This process is called fabrication, and it is only limited by the imagination of the requester. Now, before I get into the EMBERDARK spoilers, I want to do a quick reflection on all of the ambition information I just shared. Clearly, the death of a shard is no small event. After Wind and Truth, you know just how dangerous even a single clash between shards can be. For a battle that presumably took years, I can hardly imagine the devastation that took place. Planets annihilated, generations of people corrupted, and dark legends spread across the Cosmere. Granted, the clash between ruin and preservation didn't really destroy any planets, but that seemed to be more of an outlier occurrence. This should absolutely be on our minds when we think about the wars in the future era. Odium was injured after his fights with Ambition, and this led him to a different strategy strategy for destroying the Celeste shards. He pinned them against each other before finally splintering both in the cognitive realm. Now that odium is combined with honor as retribution, and he already seemed to be the most aggressive shard, save for Ruin, I don't see shard clashes happening very often in the future. Retribution is going to approach the elimination of shards in a much more thought out and controlled manner. If the death of Ambition has taught us anything, it's that you can't just pick fights with other shards just for the vibes. Okay, we are now at the part of the video where we will be getting into spoilers for Isles of the Emberdark. If you're not caught up, then you're gonna want to save this video for later. Please come back. There will be heavy plot spoilers, so proceed at your own caution. Ready? Alright, let's talk a bit more about the echoes of Ambition's destruction. We will start with the new information we learned about the Shades. Nas has greatly expanded our ideas about what Shades are. They don't have to be mindless ghosts, as Nas seems to have it mostly together. It wasn't revealed what exactly allowed him to stay so sapient, but I imagine it had something to do with his level of investiture. Nas knew what awaited him upon death, and I can only imagine that he researched ways to keep his sanity once making the transition. Though it does appear that Nas needs to make a conscious effort to remain sapient through meditation. He does risk completely losing himself when enraging, but he's still able to do it and remain intact. When he's not enraged, he's able to touch other people without withering their flesh, and he does feel cold to the touch, just like the legends of touching ghosts in real life. We also learned that Shades can be trapped in aluminum boxes, which is something we all kind of figured was the case, but it's nice to have it confirmed. Then there is the Ghostbuster guns that the Scadrians have, which allow them to trap cognitive shadows like Nas. It fires yellow beams that ensnare the ghosts. I wonder what those are. They also have a machine that can trap the shadows by turning them into a white smoke and attracting them into an aluminum box. These are the new reveals that I recall. Did I miss anything? Leave a comment below. Now, let's talk about one of the coolest lore drops of the book, the Knell and its current. The Knell is also called the Grand Disturbance of the Shard Ambition, according to Starling. Here's the initial description from Isles of the Emberdark, chapter 24. The Knell, the name they had for the enormous natural beacon near Threnody, gave at least one data point. Anyone with a proper navigation device, or hell, even a hint of sensory power, like Alamantic Bronze, could sense the invisible waves it gave off, called the current. So, if you wanted to go to the Knell, then great, you could just follow the current. Unfortunately, eldritch entities born of a god's death tended to haunt the area immediately surrounding the Knell, so visiting it and Nas's homeworld nearby was not advised. So what exactly is the Knell? Well, we aren't sure. It wasn't really confirmed in the book. Chapter 25 confirms that it was indeed born from the destruction of Ambition, in reference to one of the evil entities. One of the things born from the same event that had killed a god, made the current, erupted into the Knell. It is the North Pole for Shadesmar, and can be helpful for navigating if you know where you are and where you're going. It is also nearby Threnody and haunted by evil entities. I can't help but wonder if the Knell is in some way Ambition's perpendicularity. It could be acting strange based off of the horrible way that Ambition was destroyed. It is some sort of massive source of investiture that gives off pulses, but I cannot begin to explain why something like this could have happened. We know that a Mistborn like Vin could hear the pulses coming from the Well of Ascension, but obviously this isn't the source of navigable pulses in Shadesmar like the Knell is. Could Ambition's perpendicularity be mostly trapped in the cognitive realm here? Ambition was confirmed by Brandon to have never invested herself on a planet, and to be fair, it's not like Odium gave her much time. So if that's the case, where would her perpendicularity manifest in the physical realm? Maybe it wouldn't. Maybe this wound Odium struck was so grievous that it left her perpendicularity stuck near Threnody. Additionally, Chris theorizes in Arcanum Unbounded that there was investiture present on Threnody before the clash. If Ambition really didn't invest herself here, and it was merely one of many locations where her and Odium clashed, then it would have to be Mercy that was invested on Threnody, right? She was confirmed to be present for some of the fight by Harmony. So was she inadvertently wrapped up in the battle when Odium and Ambition landed on her doorstep? Now, it could have very well just been one of Ada Nalcium's creations like the Ancient Spren on Roshar, but that's not as fun. I want Mercy to be there. Okay, I have one more theory to pose, and it's related to the evil entities. Or you could also call them entities, the evil, Nephilim, Idoliths, type 1-6 invested entities, take your pick. Before the Sunlit Man, the evil was essentially just a legend that we learned about in Shadows for Silence in the Forests of Hell. After Sunlit Man, the existence of the evil was confirmed by Nomad. Now, we finally got to see them in action during Isles of the Emberdark. They can be as tall as skyscrapers, and they appear with many arms and elbows. They are white and translucent, and they move like they're in perpetual stop motion. Yes, their movement looks like my old computer's frame rate when I try to run too many mods on Skyrim. What is interesting about them being white and translucent is that they appear dark in the physical realm, at least according to Nomad. This actually reminds me a bit of Nightblood, as he appears black in the physical realm but glows brightly in the cognitive realm. Nightblood is special though, since he has a strong self-perception. These entities do not appear to have much capacity for thought, and they're much like the Shades in that regard. I don't know what Brandon is doing here, but it seems like the echoes of investiture, regardless of power level, seem to wilt into mindlessness when neglected or killed. We see this with the Deadeyes, Shades, entities, and even the Ancient Spren. This only gives more credit to our theory on Kusikesh from our Fourth Moon theory here. Yes, I will continue to plug this until it is confirmed. Additionally, these entities are able to have their shapes and dispositions changed with conscious projections of thoughts. This is very similar to what painters do to nightmares on Komashi, though on a much larger scale. We see one entity changed into the Dakwara near First of the Sun. This was due to the cultural perception of many people on the planet. It essentially took a religion to convert one of these things into another form, and it was still massive and highly dangerous. Now, all entities are extremely dangerous, and here's a description by Ed from chapter 25 of Isles of the Emberdark. A full Threnodite entity, a type 1-6. It could vaporize our souls with the wave of a hand. It could kill even you, or Crow, or Nas. It's a being of almost pure negative investiture. Alright, first of all, I'm happy that Vasher's system of invested entity classification has been expanded upon by Silverlight scholars. We know that type 1 invested entities are essentially raw investiture that have become self-aware. I'm just curious about the distinctions between -1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. Hopefully Brandon expands on this in the future. Anyway, now that I'm done nerding out, they are attracted to strong sources of investiture to destroy and consume. When they come upon living creatures, well, here's what initially sparked my theory. The entities show their victims terrible visions of the future to terrify them. They could just very easily consume the life force of people, but they have some sort of sadistic impulse to mentally torture their victims first. Why would they do this? They are nearly mindless mountains of ambitions and investiture, right? Well, what if that isn't the whole story? The evil never sat right with me as splinters of ambition. You would expect ambition splinters to be, well, ambitious. You could argue that desiring to eliminate a lot of people is ambitious, and that line of reasoning did work for me for a while. It wasn't until EMBERDARK was released and we finally got to see one of these creatures up close did the pieces start to come together. I bet that these creatures are not just ambitions investiture, but also odiums. When we see Honor and Odium clash in Wind and Truth, they produce anti-light. It only makes sense that anti-investiture was created from the clash between ambition and odium. But would it not also make sense that the evil entities are a mixture of both ambition and odium's intents? If you could combine divine hatred with divine aspiration, you're left with a terrifying combination. If you were to combine these two shards, I would call it malice. Malice is defined as the desire to do ill will. Well, ambition is the divine desire to do, and odium is the divine desire to hate. I could not think of a more apt description of the evil entities. Not only that, but these entities presumably use fortune to grant terrifying visions of the future to people. I know that fortune can be used by all of the shards, but odium is especially notorious for his use of the power. Also, we know that odium was injured in this fight with ambition, so to me, it would just make sense that they were both greatly injured in their fight right near Threnody, marrying their investiture together into massive, ambitious, and hateful entities. But what do you think? Could the entities just be purely ambition? How does mercy fit into all of this? Will Nightblood fulfill his destiny and destroy all of the evil entities? If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe for more. Kolo?